Sago, and welcome to Let's Talk with John and Regan.
Halito.
How you doing? Everybody good out there? Regan, we got you?
I'm so good. How are you doing?
All right, I'm doing good. Look,
I hope so.
it's it's
No, Regan is there.
it's tough.
She's there.
Yeah, no, we got her. I got her. All right, look, it's tough to be upbeat and good natured when you consider all the things that are going on. Look, the United States reached, and I say they reached a milestone in terms of reaching 100,000 dead as a result of this pandemic. But that's probably a gross undercount anyway, and so it's probably far worse than that, which doesn't make it any better. That's for sure. And especially while you've got folks like Donald Trump touting that the United States is the envy of the world and all that other stuff. And even in the midst of all this stuff, while these milestones are being met, while you've got still pockets of this disease ravaging different communities, everybody's in such a hurry to reopen and start enjoying their summer in spite of it all. And even while all that's going, and we've talked about this on previous shows, the racism continues. I mean, just the abuse that existed prior to COVID-19 continues right through it. And any of the sense that this will be a unifying force and everybody will have their kumbaya moments as they're facing this pandemic. Well, look, if you're a person of color, and that may not be the best word to use or expression to use, but if you're a marginalized person, you're still marginalized. We've seen that in terms of the numbers of people of color who seem to have the scales tilted against them, even with this virus. But one of the things that I felt like we had to address today, and I want to be real careful here because, in light of what just took place in Minnesota, in Minneapolis, another black man killed by cops. I just feel like as Native voices, we have to weigh in, not to take away or to try to alter things like Black Lives Matter into All Lives Matter or Native Lives Matter. No, none of that. I just want to throw my support. By the way, as I'm sitting here, I'm wearing my Colin Kaepernick number 7 shirt because this is what Kaepernick kneeled for. This is what he took a knee for. He didn't take the knee on the back of somebody's neck. He took a knee to try to raise awareness and he, even as he did it, he made sure that he talked about the injustices that all marginalized people, not just, for him, it wasn't just that the cops were killing black men. They were killing other people of color. There was a lot of, there's a lot of the bigotry that people of different gender preferences and ideologies are constantly being judged, and it comes down to this sense of white supremacy and how it unfolds, not just in the age of Trump, but perhaps in the age of Trump as well. But I've become so frustrated. And the thing about Minnesota is a state that it was obviously occupied territory, native territory. It's as I sit here, I'm staring at my poster for the Dakota 38, where 38 Dakota were hung by the neck in Mankato, Minnesota, because the good people of Minnesota wanted to rid themselves of the vermin that they felt plagued by. I mean, this is the attitude, and this many years later, there still is this attitude. Now, look, I'm glad to see other people stepping up, and I'll tell you, as crazy as this thing has devolved from protests to riots. Look, sometimes riots need to happen to cause change, and I'll say it. I know that might not be a popular thing for people to hear, but I got to tell you, there's a lot of Native people in the streets of Minneapolis, because there's a lot of Native people who live in Minneapolis, including living on the streets of Minneapolis, and there are a lot of Native people that are participating right alongside all of the ones who are promoting Black Lives Matter, are promoting justice in the face of what has transpired. I don't, Regan. I'll just keep rambling on. So I'm gonna catch a breath and let you weigh in a little bit on this thing.
That would be ideal. First, I wanted to express my condolences to the Floyd family and to the community. George Floyd was a community patron and someone who was well loved within his community. And I'm looking at an article that was posted by CNN earlier today, in which one of his friends said that George Floyd wanted to be his best self, that he was a gentle giant and wouldn't hurt anyone and was loved by all and an incredibly hard worker. And I think it's important that we remember George Floyd as being a positive member of his community, as being a contributing person in his community, as a family, as he was a family man. Like, it's important that we see these people who are the most targeted by police violence as people who had lives, and not to just be remembered in such a horrible state. And especially for folks out there who are continuously sharing the video of his death, please know that you are inflicting more trauma upon the Black community by doing that. We don't need to be, he needs to be remembered in the way that his family and his friends want him to be remembered, not just as a victim or a statistic, or in any way as poorly as he was treated. For those who are unaware, the 4 police officers that participated in the violent murder of George Floyd were all arrested. However, their charges have not been brought up against them. The arresting officer who had his knee upon George Floyd's neck, his name is Derek Chauvin, who he has a history within his 19 years on the police force. He has a history of violence, which is also on public record. If anyone wants to see, the New York Post actually posted it earlier today as well. And in 2006, he murdered an indigenous man as well, and charges were not brought against him either. So this is a cop that within his almost 20 years of quote unquote service, there participated in the violent murder of many people of color and violence against people of color. There was a history. It blows my mind that people like that are still able to be police. I mean, I believe in the abolition of the police state. I don't support cops. ACAB all day, baby. But I think it's important that people know that this was not his first time inflicting violence against people of color.
Yeah, and I don't want the whole bad apple thing. I have trouble with that, because when you have 3 guys, 2 others who are participating with him, and one just standing there watching it, they're all bad. I mean, because essentially anybody that would have liked to have intervened would have been would have been attacked. And I'm not saying that somebody shouldn't have intervened. I mean, at some point. This is one of those times where I think the mob has to rule. I mean, you cannot let this stuff go on. But I got to think that there are police officers, and again, I share your sentiment exactly. But there are police officers who have probably spent their entire career and never had to kill or felt they had to kill somebody. And here you have a guy who has 2 on the record situations where he took the life of somebody twice now. Once where he did it, with the brutality of literally choking somebody to death with his knee on his neck. And Regan, I also want to agree with you 100%. I haven't watched the video. I didn't watch the Ahmaud Arbery video. I never watched any of the beheading videos that everybody got all riled up about coming out of the Middle East. There's no reason. If you know something, you can. understand that it took place. I don't need to feel like I have to participate in this by being an active spectator of such a thing. It's a terrible situation. I don't know the full extent of the shooting that the same officer was involved with in terms of killing a Native person. But once I gotta think, when you get away with this stuff, it's more than likely going to continue. And this is the kind of thing that becomes, a bit of a serial nature to these cops who know that they can do these things. They know they have laws that protect them. I mean, they've got a Supreme Court ruling that literally says that the grounds for a cop to use deadly force is only his own impression that he is that there's a risk to him or the lives of others. It doesn't have to be a real risk. He only has to feel that there is. I mean, it's an absurd circumstance where somebody can have that level of unchallenged judgment, because nobody else has to. All he has to do is say, "I felt this way." It doesn't matter if the evidence suggests that there was no real threat, and clearly there was no real threat here. I mean, the idea, of kids like Tamir Rice being shot without ever even having a confrontation. The idea that you could have somebody handcuffed with their hands behind their back, face down on the road, and then the same crap that they pulled with Eric Gardner when they say, if you can tell me you can't breathe, if you can speak, you can breathe, which is somebody has to make clear that for one thing, that is a ridiculous, an absurd, a horrendous assumption for anybody to make, that if you could squeak out the words "I can't breathe," that means that you can breathe. I mean, that's absurd.
Yeah, there's something also that I forgot to mention that I definitely want to mention, was that the other arresting officer that you see in the video, who is just watching this happen, whose name is Tao, was also it also has a legacy of excessive force, and in 2017 settled out of court on an excessive force lawsuit, and in 2014 beat a man who was being arrested so fiercely and intensely that he broke his teeth. So these are, I think it's important, because a lot of the pressure is going to fall on Derek Chauvin, as it should. He's a murderer. But these are the other 4 officers that were also arrested, have legacies of violence, of violent arrest, of excessive force, and were still able to be police officers. I don't understand, and I think people don't understand that police officers go through about 6 months of training in order to understand the law, yet lawyers are supposed to go through years of training to understand the law. How can you serve and protect anyone within ignorance? I don't quite understand. I don't understand the logic. I don't understand how I don't understand how anyone supports the police.
Well,
I know people will disagree, but I don't understand how people support police.
Well, and the point that you're bringing about these guys taking this training under law,
go ahead,
about law, this probably has more to do with trying to reduce liability than actually understanding what the legal rights of an individual is. I mean, this is the part that's all crazy about it. This is all about, I mean, it's kind of like warning labels, when you have an entire industries and part of the legal profession is really based about reducing liability, not protecting people. I mean, and that's, you're right. That's also an absurd part of all of this. And like I said, when you look at, what's been transpiring here, the part that also frustrates me is every time I hear the mainstream media say that such and such died in police custody or died while they were being restrained. Let's be clear. They didn't die while they were killed. They didn't just die. They were killed. The life was taken away from them. So when I hear somebody say somebody died in police custody, or that somebody died while they were being arrested or subdued or whatever else, no, that's not what happened. They didn't like just die. They were killed. They had the life taken from them. So, and I realize that there's, murder has a bunch of legal definitions, but killing is pretty clear. When you kill somebody, and that's what's transpired here. And again, the part that I think that I want to add to this conversation, the part that I want to add is that nobody should have to live their lives in fear of the police. And when I hear people say, well, if you were
Absolutely.
if you were living right, if you had nothing to hide, if you were cooperating, no, you have to be worried about what a police officer is going to do, because not only what they are capable of doing because they're armed, but because of what they're armed with in terms of legal protections. They can get away with murder, literally, and have and do and will. And until we step up in a much bigger way, and that's why I say, look, are there people who are being the victims of the rioting that are taking place? Yeah, there probably are. But you know what? Martin Luther King says sometimes you have to riot for change, and he was considered by most rights a pacifist. I mean, it's intolerable. This has been going on too long, and no matter how many times this is raised, because I guarantee those 4 cops saw what happened to Eric Gardner. They know what happened when somebody was choked to death. These guys aren't living in a bubble. They know what they know the climate that's out there in terms of the reduced tolerance for this kind of police violence, and yet they continue. They just continue.
I think it's also important for people to know some statistics that were published just recently. As of May 2020, 400 people have been shot and killed by police. So that is just for the year of 2020.
Wow.
As of 2019, last year, 1,004 people were shot and killed by police. And in 2018, 992 people were shot and killed by police. I'm looking at the Killed by Police tracker, which is an organization that tracks murder by cop and also provides a map. And if you click on the full database, it breaks down the statistics by race as well. And for the 7 years that they have posted here, over 30% of those people are specifically Black men. So we are seeing an increase by, it's an average about in the 900 within the 7 years that are posted. So an average of 1,000 people per year are murdered by cops, and a large portion of those people are specifically Black men, and the majority of those people are Black people. It's also important to note that through statistically, Black folks are more likely to be killed by police. But Indigenous folks are actually more likely to be killed by police per capita based on our population. So we are in camaraderie and solidarity with one another, I believe, when it comes to police violence. They're just measured differently in population size per area. So I highly recommend that people look up the statistics of murder by cops, because we are targeted. People of color are targeted. Black people are targeted by cops for this violence. We see those protests of white supremacists, I will say, with their AK-47s at different town halls and city councils, who are angry that they can't go get their hair cut, and are holding these AKs, like a militarized weaponry, and there's no issue. There's no violence perpetrated against them. But then a Black man who's the cops are called are murdered, an unarmed Black man was murdered. That's racism. That's systemic racism. That is blatant racism. That's white privilege. How can there be no violence with a bunch of armed white dudes and such incredible violence against the Black man?
Well,
there
and
is no
here's one of the
except for racism, systematic racism.
Here's one of the crazy parts of all this is all of these white supremacists who've been storming these state capitol houses and all this other stuff, armed to the teeth with their automatic weapons and their body armor and their MAGA hats and all that other stuff. They claim that they need to be armed to protect themselves from tyranny. And it's the police that are the tyrants, and they're in cahoots with them. In fact, some of these guys are off-duty cops that are joining these white militia groups and these white supremacists. It's the level of white supremacy that exists within police departments. That's also a known issue. But the crazy part is again, how tolerant the police are to these guys who will arm themselves, show up someplace, obviously to intimidate with weapons, and yet it's like there's camaraderie between the white police officers and the white protesters, even though they're armed protesters. I mean, no one should let the absurdity of that go by.
And the protesters who are currently angered and justified in their rage, taking to the streets, rioting, that's, I'm 100% supportive. Let me clarify. And I echo your sentiment, John, and I believe that rioting is necessary and part of change. And it's also important to note that those people who are in the streets protesting are being currently sprayed with tear gas, but then you had those white supremacists just standing casually with their AR, whatever their weapery is, and they're not being tear gassed.
Well, and they're standing there with their hands on their weapons. They're not. It's not like it's just slung over their shoulder. These guys are standing there with their hands on the hand grips and their fingers on the trigger. Literally, when you see some of the shots of this stuff, it's crazy.
Yeah, it's incredible, and I do want to say, like, the reason that I may be losing my words here so much is that I'm personally so angered by this, and have been in conversations with a lot of my kin all day today and all day yesterday about this. And it's a point I'm flabbergasted, and I can't believe that even the rhetoric coming out of the people who are protesting George Floyd's death is so problematic. And I need folks to understand that this is an excellent example of white privilege. This is an excellent, it's a horrible example, obviously, but it's an excellent example of white privilege. People who are able to protest because they want to go get their hair cut, and then somebody protesting because an unarmed black man was killed, are held on different levels within the settler cop violence. One is worth tear gassing and one is worth supporting. That is white privilege.
Well, and I think the other thing that people have to acknowledge is that this is not Minnesota. This isn't just Minneapolis. Ahmaud Arbery was killed in Georgia. There's been killings in California, in the farther up into the Northwest. Sandra Bland down in Texas. You've got the situation, in New York, obviously, Baltimore, Louisville. It's every place. I mean, in New York, within this week, not only did you have the news that came out over the whole Ahmaud Arbery murder, but then you have a white woman who knows how much of a response she can get from the cops when a black man tells her that she needs to leash her dog in an area of Central Park that requires a leash, and she gets so outraged and threatens and starts coming at the guy, threatening to call the police and and he's literally telling this black man, "I'm going to call the cops and say that you're threatening my life," because she knows. I mean, this is a prime example of what white people know. Yeah. They know how the cops will react to any, again, whether it's even a real perceived threat. All you have to do is allege that you have a perceived threat, and white cops will respond.
Mm-hmm. I wanted to, just for folks, since this was a New York City-based incident.
Yeah.
Since this was a New York City-based incident, I do want to just kind of give a little bit of context in case people don't know about it, because you should.
Sure.
So Amy Cooper who worked for an investment firm known as Franklin Templeton, was letting her Cocker Spaniel off leash in the brambles of Central Park, where there are signs that say that the dog must be leashed. Christian Cooper, who is the man who she called the cops against,
no relation, by the way,
was bird watching in Central Park and asked her to leash. No relation. Yeah, it's so odd how that happened. And he requested that she put her dog on a leash, which she was supposed to. And she said to him that no one's here. It's early in the morning, and he expressed that I am here, and you need to put your dog on a leash. And so she refused, and then he took out his camera and was recording her reaction, in which she says, I'm going to call the cops and tell them that an African-American man is threatening my life.
Right.
Which is not what he said. He said, I asked you to put your dog on a leash. She's then on the phone with the cops saying there's an African-American man threatening my life, in which he is just filming her and is relatively silent in the call. She is choking her Cocker Spaniel in an attempt to restrain it, and the dog actually collapses at the end of the video.
Jeez.
Since this happened, Amy Cooper has been put on leave by Franklin and Templeton, and they released a statement saying that they don't want, that this is under investigation, and that they're, that they're shocked of the racism coming from one of their employees, and therefore she has been put on leave. The rescue that she adopted the Cocker Spaniel from took the dog back. The dog had to be surrendered because the video actually did show animal cruelty within it. And she is going to, according to the most recent article, there's an investigation by the New York City Commission of Human Rights considering whether or not she should be sued or prosecuted, because she was aware that there was such a threat in calling law enforcement on a Black man. And so so folks know that this is kind of the background behind it. She has released an apology, which, by the way, was the worst apology ever. But she has released an apology in which Christian Cooper stated that, he has no issue as long as she leashes her dog. This is about leashing a dog in Central Park, and she said and knew that in calling the police, she was putting a Black man, threatening his life. I'm appreciative that there was so much backlash. I think it's important that white folks know that there are consequences to racist actions. And I do hope that charges are brought against her personally.
Sure. Absolutely. Hey, we're at the bottom of the hour, so we'll take a break. I want to do a little bit of WBAI pitching when we come back. So why don't we have Reggie take us out with a little Murray Porter, and we'll come right back. One of the things I want to talk about is, again, the freewheeling attitude that the police have towards inflicting harm to the neck, face, and head of the people whose only job it is supposed to be is to serve and protect. I mean, so I want to talk about that when we come back. So this is John and Regan. This is Let's Talk. We'll go out and we'll be right back after this. This is Let's Talk. All right, thanks for coming back. This is John Kane with Regan
the
Vloggins.
All, and welcome back.
We I have to explain to people, we do have a little bit of a delay.
I think
we do have a delay. So if Regan and I talk over each other, or if we have gaps in between our conversations, this is still us working out the system that we're using. I know the audio sounds better, so I'm hoping that everybody is. Again, I hope people are enjoying the program, even as we talk about issues that are not very enjoyable. We are in fund drive mode, which is part of the reason we're on at 4:00 at this point. So I want to remind people to go to the pledge line, go to 516-620-3602, make a pledge to WBAI, do it in the name of the show. Look, that's the way we get back to our 2-hour slot. I'm going to be honest with you. Make a pledge to the station. Do it in the name of this show. It can be a one-time donation. It can be you can become a BAI buddy. I'd love to add another 10 or 20 people to our buddy list, and we do pretty good. We've got a number of you listeners who listen to the program. Who have signed up as buddies, and we're sure to appreciate it. You can also go online. You can go to www.give2wbai.org. That's GIVE, the number 2, WBAI.org. And there you can, again, same thing. You can make a one-time donation. You can become a BAI buddy. There'll be a text box you can fill in as far as the show that you want to sponsor or make your donation in the name of. You can even do a text. You can follow the prompts to know how to make a donation via text. So there's any number of ways you can do it. Look, to become a WBAI buddy, what you essentially do is you provide your credit card information or your checking account information and sign up for $5, $10, $20, $30 a month. Where we know that money's coming in each month, and it helps us to plan. And it's one of the programs that we really do try to promote during our fund drive, and frankly, when we're not in fund drive mode. So as we are going through this time, and I realize that many people are not working, many people are challenged financially, but if you have the resources, if you are working, if you have the ability to support a station that is in all likelihood providing you something that nobody else is providing you. That's what we kind of take pride here at WBAI. So I encourage people to go to the pledge line. Again, 516-620-3602. That's the number to call to make a pledge of any size or a recurring pledge, whatever suits your needs. We'd greatly appreciate it. So I just wanted to do my pitching for WBAI and for Let's Talk with John and Regan. Hey, before I get back into it, I do want to say our friend Kat Carnes returned home. She just left, I think, yesterday. When she gets settled and can give us a kind of a retrospective on her experience at Langone Hospital, I would love to have her join us. You may even have her friend who traveled with her to New York join us. This is I think is still a show and still a conversation that people need to be aware of. There's so much fluff out there. There's so much misinformation, disinformation that has been put out there. Granted, I know there's a lot that's unknown, and there's a lot that's unknown about the disease. There's a lot that's unknown about how it spreads, why it spreads, where it came from, if and when it'll go away. So I understand all that, but to hear from people that are on the front line, who have been treating the ill, who've had people die in their care because this is such a voracious disease. I think it's important that people understand that is some truth that you're not going to get every place else. And a Kat is a friend of mine. She's not just somebody who's trying to become media savvy to sell or tell a story. This is somebody that I reached out to because I know that she worked in the traveling nurses program and volunteered to move herself from the safer surroundings of Oklahoma to go to New York City, which was the ground zero, the hot spot for the coronavirus. So I want to thank Kat for her service to the city, Brooklyn in particular, but her service to the city. I want to wish her well in her time to recuperate, I guess, from all of that. So I wanted to give that shout out. Hey, by the way, and I'll do it anyway. It doesn't mean as much to everybody else, but today's my grandson's birthday too. My grandson turned 8 years old today, so happy birthday, Trenton Kane. Same last name.
Oh, that's wonderful.
I try to do that when my grandkids have birthdays, so I'll just throw it out there. Hey, one thing I wanted to talk about.
I love that. That's so wonderful. Tell him happy birthday.
I will. One of the things that has to be made clear. anytime you hear about somebody getting their eye socket busted or their teeth knocked out or, being choked to death or their head split, there is no reason for police to beat people around the head and neck. I mean, look, even if you are struggling to detain somebody because you've deemed them worthy of arrest, there's still no reason to beat them around the head and face. That is a vicious, violent act. And it has very little to do with subduing somebody. The idea of subduing a body, especially when there's four of you, one man per arm and leg. I mean, there's no reason to be crushing somebody's neck. There's no reason to beat somebody, in the back of the head or in the face, to be dislodging their teeth and breaking facial bones. And it happens all the time. And I'll tell you, these riots are necessary as long as no one is stepping up to say that this kind of abuse is just that. It's unlawful abuse. And so when I look, every time I hear one of these stories about and see somebody's mugshot, and I get it. In some cases, these are some very bad people that are being arrested. But you know what? That's not the judgment for the police. I mean, I'm not a fan of the system in general, but the idea that the police officers step up as the punishers, not just and the difference between corporal punishment and capital punishment. Corporal is about what you do to the body. Capital is about what you do to the head. And it comes from the Latin word for head and versus the Latin word for body. The idea that not only are these police officers inflicting corporal punishment in terms of physically beating somebody, but the idea that they're inflicting capital punishment by beating the people around the head and face and neck is. And I'm not hearing anybody talk about this. We see these pictures. Ironically, when you see these white serial killers who the police take by Burger King on the way to their arraignment, they never look beaten up the way somebody who, and again, regardless of what the charge is here, and certainly what George Floyd was accused of is. The level of punishment that was inflicted, I mean, capital punishment that was inflicted upon him, is so disproportionate to the idea of, and I've heard it had to do with fraud with a check. I heard it had to do with possibly a fake bill that he may have been trying to pass, which is almost irrelevant. And in fact, the difference between what he is being accused of, and by the way, the store owner was appalled, and they've been told not to release their surveillance video. The store owner is defending George Floyd. I mean, so even the facility, the business that may have had an issue with George Floyd is outraged and appalled and just aghast at what these police officers did to him.
The owners of the store did release a statement earlier today about it, in which they were again voicing how disgusted they were in the reaction. George Floyd was murdered for quote unquote using a fake $20 bill. I say that because it hasn't been proven yet. Right. And Eric Garner was murdered for selling loosies, for selling cigarettes on the street corner. But as you said, serial killers, people who bomb movie theaters, white young men who do these horrible crimes are brought in so gently, and then the conversation becomes, oh, well, they were bullied or they were mentally ill. And yet people don't discuss or consider that is, again, a part of the white privilege. Absolutely. That is, again, an exercise of white privilege. I really don't care if George Floyd or Eric Garner committed these crimes. It doesn't matter. It doesn't in any way justify their deaths, their violent deaths by the hands of police. I don't care if they were lifelong criminals or survival criminals. I don't care. Those definitions have been placed upon specifically Black men for so long without considering survival tactics as well as just livelihoods. What if the $20 bill was used and he was unaware that it was fake?
Well, and I got to tell you,
what if that is the narrative?
I went to a couple of shops.
Or what if he did know?
I went to a couple of shops where I tried to when they issued the new bills and those pens didn't work right, and and their scanners to so I went to it, and this was right up by one of the parks there, right in Manhattan, and I tried to buy lunch. I had all my food there, and I couldn't pay for it because they wouldn't accept my $50 bill, and they said it wouldn't pass. It wouldn't pass their counterfeit checker. So it's entirely possible that the whole thing is a misunderstanding in the first place, which becomes a moot point when a person is murdered. And I want to be clear. Eric Gardner was not selling loose cigarettes at the time that he was killed. That's what the police had been harassing him for. Yeah. But on the day that they killed him, he was not committing a crime. They just targeted him and showed up there. And I don't even know if they had an arrest warrant for him, but he had just broken up a fight in the neighborhood, and the police just targeted him and ultimately, once again came after him. And there was no evidence. Nobody has ever supplied any evidence that suggested that Eric Gardner had committed a crime that day, even if you want to, get into, that the heinousness of selling a loose cigarette as a crime. But, this is how this all gets twisted. And it is completely disproportionate. I mean, we talk about the idea of crime and punishment, which is a difficult concept anyway. There's no restorative justice. And when you've got, predominantly white men who decide what is the appropriate jail time, what is the appropriate level of punishment to fit a crime. It's always different for white people. It's always different whether it's a Manafort or a Stone or it's always different for a white man than it is, and that's why crack cocaine was had higher sentencing rates than the white affluent cocaine that the white cocaine that the affluent were using. I mean, it plays it out over and over and over again. And, and that's why I say, look, I know it's inappropriate, perhaps, that people advocate for the kinds of riots that are taking place in Minnesota, in Minneapolis. But you know what? That city has a history. I don't know if you know this, but the reason AIM came to be, the American Indian Movement came to be, regardless of how people feel about AIM today as we see there, but the reason it started up was because the violence that Native people were experiencing as they were being encouraged or oftentimes forced to move into the cities. It was Native people who were being disproportionately beaten, not only by white society, but again by law enforcement. AIM came to be because there was a need to protect Native people who were living in these urban environments. And when we talk about and you so accurately talked about the level of death by cop proportionate to our population. Native people live in all the demographics except the 16 to 22 age group, and that's where and again it's black men are right there neck and neck with Native people proportionate to our population. But one of the big differences. A lot of the violence that Native people experience it has been in the cities, but it's not only in the cities. Most of the violence that takes place out in the rural confines of our territories or the communities around our territories, you're never going to get videotape. Because let's be clear, none of this stuff would be news, and the cops would never be charged or punished or answerable if this stuff wasn't caught on video. And that's only going to be caught on video where you have a population that, like you say, an urban population where you're going to have more people around to catch this stuff. I mean, if you're talking about the rural areas, you're not gonna get videotape of somebody killing a native person, but in the cities, there's a better chance that you're going to catch that. So, and that's why I think the numbers, people are so unaware. We don't make the headlines. Look, we've been fighting to try to get missing and murdered Indigenous women, draw attention to that. That's again, another example of white supremacy and the idea of targeting people who are marginalized, not just women, but women of color in particular. And of course, it doesn't just stop there. You can speak probably more freely about the experience that the gay and transgender and two-spirit people experience as a result of bigotry. Because when we talk about white supremacy, we're talking about white male heterosexual males who are responsible for the crime bills. They're responsible for setting up what is going to be the sentencing guidelines and all that other stuff, and ruling in these cases of police officer abuse.
Absolutely. It's all connected. Transphobia, queerphobia, racism, they're all teaching from settler colonialism. These aren't ours. And when I say ours, I say Indigenous folks. These aren't ours. This is not our police force. This is not our justice. This is not how we define this. And it would never, which is why it is so important that Indigenous people come and create solidarity movements with Black folks, as we are the most targeted in our society, and it is important for us to come together. I do want to talk briefly before we end the show a little early about the riots in Minneapolis and in Minnesota throughout, and they're incredibly echoing and hearkening to the 2014 riots held in Ferguson after the shooting of Michael Brown by police officer Darren Wilson. And I remember, taking to the streets when that happened. And one of the things that we kept chanting was that we do not mourn broken windows, because people were so angry that folks were rioting or looting or, participating in vandalism or whatever criminalized words they were using. And it was they were angry about property, about stores, and about windows being broken, not about the fact that Michael Brown was shot by Darren Wilson. Like that, the people who come to the aid of folks and saying, oh, we shouldn't be rioting, oh, peaceful disobedience, blah, 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 all of that. You are protecting the capitalist state. You're protecting property over people's lives. Like, there is no justification. We do not mourn broken windows. They can be rebuilt. Lives cannot be, you can't bring someone back from the death. We can't bring back Michael Brown or Eric Garner or George Floyd or, the hundreds of people,
Freddie Gray,
specifically
Tamir
Black
Rice,
people who have been murdered by police violence. We can't bring them back.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, all of them. Say their name. We can't bring them back, but we can restock CVS shelves. It will be okay. So for those who in any way come and criticize people who are justly within their rage, righteous within their rage, remember that the counter argument is to protect property and things over people.
Well, and
that
on that point,
the rhetoric that is pushed forward. We protect our people first.
Let's be clear. The whole reason that police forces, constables on patrol were developed in the first place was to protect property. That's what their whole jobs are. And it's still that. And it's not even, about protecting property. It's about creating an air that you can, amongst people who don't have stuff, that you can't take this stuff. I mean, one of the guys who got sentenced to pretty harshly out of Ferguson was a young kid who had broke a windshield of a police car. He had never had a record or anything else. The kid had never been in trouble in his life, and they threw the book at this guy, and he got caught up right, and justifiably so, caught up in this notion that police have been so abusive to black people and other people of color, that this was his one moment to take a shot back, and not at a police officer, but at, as you said, a piece of glass that could be replaced. I mean, this is this notion of putting a higher value on objects. I mean, that is, it's like I said, when you look at what a snapshot this is of American culture, of what it is to be an American. I mean, it's pretty sad, but it's I hate to say it, but it's damn accurate. It's damn accurate, because this is the way people have learned how to live their lives, and to put a higher value on things, on possessions, on, and you know what, the value is disproportionate to the cost. I mean, you think about somebody being killed for a pair of sneakers, and these kinds of things that happen in the world that we live in. And the whole hope for I know for you and for me as well, that something was going to click about the failure of capitalism and consumerism in the wake, or in the midst of this pandemic, but it hasn't. It hasn't. I mean, it's just too much embedded in American culture.
I totally agree, and it's disappointing, and I hope that folks listening understand that the best way to combat this is to create solidarity networks with Black folks on the ground, with Black organizers. We take their lead in this, because this is Black Lives Matter. Like, this is where we need to be. This is where we need to stand. There are plenty of organizations that you can get involved with. But I want to urge folks listening that this is unacceptable. This is a legacy. It will continue unless we stop it. Absolutely. All right. Hey, we're about ready to sign off here. I do want to remind people that we are in fund drive mode. I would appreciate anybody that would go to the pledge line, go to 516-620-3602, make a pledge of any size to WBAI. Do it in the name of Let's Talk with John and Regan. You can go to the website, www.give2wbai.org. You can become a buddy of the program of the station. You can make a one-time donation. You can text a donation. You can go to the website, and it'll help guide you through any of that. One of the easiest ways is you pick up the phone and go to the pledge line, 516-620-3602. That's the number to call to make a pledge to WBAI in the name of Let's Talk. Thanks, Regan. Thanks, Reggie. We'll be back next week. Yahweh.